Thank you everybody for joining us today for our industry update with Melissa and John, and Dr. Sheets will be our guest speaker at the beginning. As always, please remember to mute your lines during the presentation and use the chat feature for asking questions. Be sure to send the chat to everyone, not just to Eric, so that the questions can be read. We are recording this and we'll be sending out the recording to those who signed up, and we'll be posting this out on our website. With that, I'm going to turn this over to you, John, to kick us off.
Thank you very much, Hope, and welcome everyone. We're glad to have you with us today. Thank you for tuning in. As a reminder, the information that's presented on today's webinar is for the use and benefit of our restaurant, hotel, travel, and tourism partners and any other interested friends of PRLA, except for the press. This is an off-the-record webinar today. It's not designed for press purposes. So if you're with the press, kindly disconnect and reach out to us, and we'd be happy to talk to you one-on-one at that time. And with that, we're really excited to have with us today Dr. Jignesh Sheth, who is the Chief Medical Officer for the Wright Center for Community Health and Senior Vice President of Enterprise and Clinical Operations and Education Integration at the Wright Center for Graduate Medical Education in Scranton. Dr. Sheth is going to fill us in on vaccines today, and hopefully you'll have a much better understanding of vaccines, what they do, what's involved in them, and maybe also how you can obtain them. So with that, I'm very happy to have with us today Dr. Sheth. Doctor, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, John, for introducing me and giving me the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate this opportunity, and in order to talk about vaccines. Just as a brief interview, I'm the Chief Medical Officer of the Wright Center for Community Health, as well as the Wright Center for Graduate Medical Education. We are in the we have primary care services here in Northeastern PA. We have about eight clinical practices, and we also train medical residents. We have about 200 plus residents in Pennsylvania, as well as around 5 states in the country where the Wright Center residents are trained in primary care setting. We train residents in internal medicine and family medicine, psychiatry, geriatrics, cardiology, gastroenterology. So we are embedded in the community in both providing care to over 30,000 plus patients. We see about 120,000 visits a year. So we have deep-rooted experience in both providing care to our patients as well as training the next generation of physicians. From a COVID vaccine standpoint, as the Chief Medical Officer, I have been personally involved in rolling out the vaccine program at the Wright Center, along with my team. And so far, as of this morning, we have given close to 22,000 doses of COVID vaccine since the onset. We were one of the first outpatient providers to receive the vaccine. So I can tell you that we have vast experience in administering COVID vaccines, including seeing the effects, side effects, reactions, so on and so forth. So before we go into any specific questions, I did want to talk about what are these vaccines? And you hear a lot about there are these newer technology called the mRNA technology, and then you talk about this new vaccine that was just launched, which is Johnson & Johnson, and it's using an old adenovirus strain, and what's the whole deal around all of these vaccines? So what is an mRNA? mRNA is, I see mRNA, since you guys are from restaurant industry, mRNA is just a recipe. And what does this recipe make? So if all of you have seen the coronavirus, because the picture of that is all over now in the world. And coronavirus has those little spikes on the surface of its body. Those spikes are used by the virus to attach to our cells, and that's how the virus enters the body cells. What vaccines are doing is trying to target those spikes, because if we can attack those spikes, we can neutralize the virus and prevent that virus from attaching to our body cells. So pretty much every vaccine that's out there, whether approved or in trial, is attacking that spike protein in some shape or form. So the mRNA, as I said, is a recipe that is delivered to anyone who gets the vaccine. And that recipe helps us make those spike proteins ourselves in our own body. So we make those spike proteins in our body. Now those spike proteins mimic the actual spikes that sit on the surface of the coronavirus. So the body is tricked into thinking there is virus when there isn't any, it's just the protein particles. And then the body makes antibodies against those particles. And then now we have antibodies ready in our body in case we got exposed to the real virus, which then the antibodies attack the virus right away, neutralize the virus, and prevent the disease from either getting worse or potentially killing us. So that's how the mRNA technology works. So one thing, since it's a recipe, it only enters our body cells. It never enters the nucleus, which is the heart of the cell. And it's the heart of the cell where the DNA is stored. So this whole myth around, well, this mRNA is going to attach to our DNA, that's completely false, because it stays inside the cell. It never enters the heart of the cell, which is the nucleus. It's the heart in the brain of the cell is called the nucleus. It never enters there. And that's where the DNA is stored. So it will not modify our DNA. It has no impact on the DNA long term. And the mRNA is so as soon as it enters the cell, that recipe helps us create those spike proteins, and then the messenger dies. So the recipe then it's self-destroyed by the cell. But then our own body cells make these proteins that look like the proteins that sit on the coronavirus. And that's how the whole vaccine works. So both Pfizer and Moderna work on the same technology. The recipe is very sensitive and it's very hard to store and transport. Think about a piece of paper you got at an excavation site in Egypt when they were trying to get stuff out of the mummies or the stuff out of those pyramids. You know, you get that sensitive paper that has to be transported between two pieces of glass. And if you don't do it that way, the paper is going to be crushed into like powder before it can even be moved from place A to place B. Think about mRNA as just as sensitive as that piece of paper that we discovered on excavation. So what we have done is we have put layers of lipids similar to the two glass pieces for the paper. And that's how that mRNA is transported, by covering it in lipid particles. And that's why it has to be frozen, because if you don't freeze it, it's going to disintegrate right into the bottle. And hence these vaccines are hard to transport. And there is a cost involved when you transport frozen items. And you guys know more than I do, because you guys in restaurant industry, you have a ton of stuff that is transported frozen. And you know that transporting a frozen item is a lot more expensive than a non-frozen or refrigerated item. Hence, the technology was already existent. It's just that we did not use the technology because of the cost involved in transporting those vaccines. But of course, with the pandemic, the way it progressed, the funding was made available, and the vaccine technology could be quickly delivered, because transporting a recipe and modifying the recipe, so you come to it and you feel like you have this brand new recipe to make an apple pie. And I try to use examples around restaurant industry because that's where the audience are. And you realize that half of your customers don't like the certain taste or the certain sweetness to it. You can immediately go back and say, well, let's add a little bit more sugar to the recipe, and then you can get what the customer wants. Similarly, when a virus mutates, you just change the recipe of that spike protein and make sure that the new batch of the vaccine has the new protein. So at the end of the year, if we discover that the South African strain is now in the country and we really need to change the way our vaccine works, we can change the spike protein in no time, because it's all about changing that recipe to match what is existent in the community and which is the most prevalent virus type in the community. Hence, this technology is really helpful, and that's the most common vaccine that we are currently using. Johnson & Johnson, on the other end, is not an mRNA technology. It's actually using an adenovirus, a virus that causes common cold. They are using that virus as a vector. On top of that virus, they put a DNA particle. A DNA particle is more like a floppy disk or a CD that has stored the information. The reason that information is stored as a DNA is because it's easy to transport. It doesn't disintegrate. And that DNA mimics the DNA that's found inside the virus that helps the virus make its own protein. So we took a DNA outside of the virus, the actual coronavirus, put it on an adenovirus, which is a cold or a common cold causing virus. It delivers a piece of the coronavirus DNA into our body, which, by the way, does enter the nucleus of the cell in our body. And then our own nucleus uses that DNA to make the mRNA, which is in the other case delivered to us. So then we make our own mRNA. And that mRNA that is made by our own cells is then making those protein particles, which then by that time, the process is still the same. So the only difference is, in this case, we are delivering the recipe. In the other case, you're delivering a recording of the recipe. And then based on the recording, we make the recipe, and then the recipe makes the protein. So this is a step before the mRNA step, so that we are delivering DNA particle from the original coronavirus into the body with Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And that's the similar to AstraZeneca, which is not approved in the United States, approved in other countries. Pretty much most of the other countries are using AstraZeneca. They are using a chimpanzee virus that is not able to cause infection in humans as a vector to carry a piece of the DNA of the original coronavirus that is delivered, by the way, inside the nucleus, which is the heart and brain of the cell. And that DNA particle then helps us make the mRNA equivalent of Moderna or Pfizer by our own nucleus. And then that mRNA then produces the protein. So that's, in a nutshell. I think it's probably a little bit more information than everybody expected, but I'm passionate about it. I wanted to make sure I explain everyone how these technologies work. So these are the three major vaccines. Pfizer and Moderna are both mRNA. Johnson & Johnson is adenovirus. I try to address some of the common myths around it. For example, that mRNA is not changing your DNA, and neither is that small DNA particle that is delivered by Johnson & Johnson. That is not changing our DNA. It sits there, it produces the recipe for mRNA, and that's it. And that DNA does not integrate with the human DNA. So there is no long-term effect of that. And the vector virus technology is an age-old technology, and we've used that with previous vaccine, like the Ebola vaccine, Zika virus vaccine that was developed in last several years. They use the same technology that was also developed by Johnson & Johnson. So it's important to know that vaccine technology has been put to use a little bit longer than the mRNA technology. So which vaccine should you get? Because you hear about all these numbers. One is 95%, one is 66%. My advice to everyone on this call is do not look at those numbers. All three vaccines are equally good. All three vaccines are very effective. All three vaccines will help you prevent hospitalization and death. And that's the message I want to take out. And also remember, the Pfizer and Moderna trials were done in the very beginning of the pandemic. And at that time, you did not have these 5 different kinds of coronavirus floating around. So when Johnson & Johnson did their trials, we had 3 different kinds of coronavirus out in the community. As a result, they were testing their vaccine in a different environment than when Pfizer tested theirs. So I don't know if truly comparing 95% effectiveness of Pfizer and Moderna to 66% effectiveness of Johnson & Johnson, I don't think it's comparing apples to apples, it's apples to oranges, because the community or the setting in which they were testing their vaccine was very different. So you cannot say that it's the same environment, because it definitely was not. The other thing is Johnson & Johnson is single dose, so people are very attached to it, and they feel like, you know, it's 1 shot versus 2. My goal is to tell you, everyone, is get the vaccine that's available to you. Do not go looking and shopping around, I want this versus that. All 3 vaccines are equally effective. All 3 vaccines have shown to prevent death at the same rate. So your chances of dying from coronavirus go equally down no matter which vaccine you get. And our endpoint was always hospitalization and death. And even Johnson & Johnson is 80% plus effective in preventing deaths. And I think that's a pretty good number. So please do not wait for a particular brand of vaccine. Take the one that's available to you. Take the one that's available in your region, and you will be, you will be protected. So please, that's one thing. How do you find out who's providing the vaccine? Go to the PA Department of Health website. They have a map. They have a phone number on who to call and where to get the vaccine. Vaccines are currently in shortage, but I can assure you by the end of this month or middle of next month, we should see significant increase in supply of vaccines. And everybody who wants a vaccine should be able to get a vaccine by sometime in May. And I see that as a number that we should all be shooting for. By May, the availability is going to be significantly better. And we have come along this long without a vaccine. A couple months of waiting is not going to harm anyone. So if by chance you don't have the vaccine available today or tomorrow, I just want to give the message, let's not panic. within a month or so, the supply and the availability is going to increase significantly. And there are studies now saying that we might actually be swimming in vaccines by summer. Like we'll have more vaccine than we ever need in this country because I think the government has done enough work in securing enough doses for all Americans. It's just a matter of time, and let's not panic. Things will get better. It is already getting better. But go to the PADOH website, Pennsylvania Department of Health website. They have a lot of information about COVID-19. They also address FAQs, myths, and what to expect from the vaccine, where to find the vaccine. There's a map that says, how in your region, how to find the vaccine provider. They also talk about the supply and how much vaccine is delivered to each vaccinating site. So there is a ton of information that's always updated. So instead of going to any particular website, just go to PADOH because I think that's the most reliable website and that's the only website that you need to go to. I'm assuming everyone here is from Pennsylvania, right, John?
Yeah, for the most part, there might be some folks in New Jersey on the border there too.
I mean, they can also use the PADOH website, but I mean,
Yep.
they can go to their own NJDOH website. And again, they are all equally useful and they all have maps. They all have the same information. And some of the information is always directing you back to CDC, but you don't even have to go to CDC. One place to go in is your own state's Department of Health website. That is the most reliable and the most accurate and most updated, frequently updated website that you can find. So please, I would recommend that everyone has bookmark that website and goes there at least once a day to see if there are any new updates. Common myths I want to address, like, are the vaccines safe? Yes, they are absolutely safe. It has been administered in more than 100 million people across the world. 65 million of them are in US, and the vaccines, they have not caused any deaths. So I can tell you the vaccine is extremely safe. Was it developed too quick? I don't think so. It was developed at a rapid pace than what we have done in the past vaccine efforts. And why was it developed so quickly? Well, because the demand for it was so quick, number one. The funding for it was available more than you have ever seen for any vaccine in the history of mankind. And the last but not the least is enrolling participants in the vaccine trial was probably easier than any other vaccine in the history of mankind. There were rampant cases all over. So testing the effectiveness of the vaccine was also very easy. Because when you have like millions and millions of cases, it's easy to see what percentage of your control got the disease and what percentage of your test subject got the disease, and how much of them, how many of those patients were hospitalized and how many of them died, because the death rate was so high, the infection rate was so high. So getting that data was easy. But look at some rare disease like Zika virus that Johnson & Johnson came out with a vaccine. Even if there was funding available, you can never test the effectiveness of the vaccine to an extent that we did with COVID because the cases are so low. So how do you know if the vaccine even works? Because the incidence rate of the cases are so low, you have no way to find out scientifically if the vaccine works. And same thing with the Ebola virus. I mean, yes, there was an epidemic, but it wasn't as bad as COVID. So testing the effectiveness in test versus control groups is harder when the incidence of the disease is low. So as I have a master's in public health background, so I can talk about epidemiology all day. But the point of the matter is, if you do not have enough incidents, which is enough new cases reported on a daily basis, testing the effectiveness of a treatment or a vaccine is very hard. And it takes years to see if it works. But in this case, not only the vaccine was developed at a rapid pace, even the treatments like monoclonal antibodies, which we do at the Wright Center. It's a very effective treatment. Same thing what President Trump got when he was positive for COVID. And it's an excellent treatment. And thanks to the US government, it's available free for every American. And that is a treatment that was also similarly created at a much faster pace than any other medicine because the funding was available, but the clinical trials could easily identify the effectiveness of that treatment because of the availability of so many cases around the country and around the world. So I don't think it was developed too quickly. I think it was efficiently developed, and we should be proud of ourselves as Americans because the first two vaccines in the world were US based. Johnson & Johnson is US based and technology. And the next thing I want to say is the best the BAM therapy or the monoclonal antibody therapy that we are using are also US-based technologies. And we have done tremendous amount of work as a country developing vaccines, treatments, protocols, and I don't think it was done too quickly or we were cutting corners. That's not what we did. Some of the other things I've heard is, well, the vaccine, the second shot is very hard and the first one is easy, and there's a reaction. It's a side effect. I don't think it's a reaction. The side effect is, yeah, after the second dose, your arm may be sore for 2 days, but again, not the end of the world. In 48 hours, the symptoms disappear. At the end of your 48-hour period, miraculously, you wake up the third morning, and you feel like, well, it's all done. It is almost like it wasn't there. So I have got my 2 doses. I got my first one in December when the day it was launched, the second one in January. And I worked throughout after my first and second doses. And I did not miss a single day of work because of vaccine. And so did most of my colleagues worked. A couple of my colleagues did take a day off, which is fine. You can plan for a day off after your second dose. So please don't feel that the vaccine is going to be hard for you to tolerate. It's extremely easy and it's very well tolerated.
Doctor, I think it's
that answered most of the questions. I'm going to let Hope ask me if their audience had any questions.
Yeah, there was a question about information indicating that the vaccines may only be good for 90 days. Is there any truth to that, or have you heard anything about that, about the duration of the vaccines?
No, I think the 90-day mark comes from infection. When you get an actual coronavirus infection, how long are you protected? Because now the actual virus made your body create the antibodies. So there is research to say that once you get the infection, you protected only for 90 days. But after that, your protection goes down. So should the patient who already got COVID get the vaccine? The answer to that is yes. And that's where the 90-day number comes into play. The vaccine, as we know now, is good at least for a year. And if this continues the way it seems it will continue, we'll probably be looking at a booster next winter. I mean, this coming winter, November, December of 2021.
So, Doctor, you've answered a couple of other questions that were asked, but one of them more specifically is, I think I heard you say that if you've been infected, you should wait 90 days after you've been infected to get the shot? No?
No. So, no, what I said is the 90-day came into play because people always ask, if I got COVID, how long am I protected? Yeah. And the general answer is for 90 days, I think those antibodies last. But as far as the vaccination timeline is concerned, I want to clarify, within 14 days after your infection, you are eligible for a vaccine. CDC recommends not to wait the 90 days. That was the old guidelines. That was like taken away 2 months ago, but that's where the 90-day confusion came into play. Currently, the guideline is, and that it has been for last 2 months, 14 days after your COVID positive infection, you become eligible for a vaccine.
Okay, that's great. That answers
do not wait. Do not wait.
Yeah. There was one other one that's the question was, does the vaccine help prevent future COVID pulmonary embolisms if you currently are being treated for these?
It doesn't. Pulmonary embolism is one of the complications of having COVID infection. So I wouldn't say it prevents pulmonary embolism. It prevents complications from COVID, one of which is pulmonary embolism. But to say it prevents pulmonary embolism will be wrong. It prevents complications of, if you do get infected, which you potentially can get infected even after getting the vaccine, the infection will stay mild and it will not progress to moderate or severe. It will prevent hospitalization. It will prevent deaths, which means it's preventing complication, one of them being pulmonary embolism.
Okay. A big topic in the news is covered by this question. What is the likelihood of carrying the virus after you get vaccinated? In other words, how safe is it to be around people who are not yet vaccinated?
It's a good question. So the vaccine was never tested to prevent infection. All the vaccines that are out there, the 95% efficacy they talk about is preventing hospitalization and moderate to severe disease. It is not about preventing the disease by itself. We have seen in retrospect that the vaccinated people do have some protection and they against actually getting the infection. But that is not what the drug manufacturer is telling us. So I tell all my patients, even after the vaccination, you could still get the infection and you could still spread it to other people around you. It only protects you from dying and getting hospitalized.
Okay. And lastly, one of the questions was a statement I'm going to read because I think I speak for the entire group when I say this. Thank you for such a clear, relatable explanation for a very confusing and rumor-rich topic. It's clear that you're a teacher because your use of analogies is really helpful in understanding what's really going on with these viruses. We really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
There was one more question that I think would be interesting. So I've heard it come up before about fertility. Does the vaccine affect fertility, or is it dangerous for pregnant women to take this vaccine? I think that is a question that circulates around sometimes.
So actually, American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, ACOG, has recommended pregnant women to get the vaccine. And at the Right Center, we have vaccinated several pregnant women because that's the current recommendation. It again depends on the woman. It has not shown any effect on fertility on any of the studies. Again, it does not cause any DNA modification. We shouldn't expect that. And it has not shown in any studies to affect fertility in any way. So actually, every obstetric society across Europe, across US, and many major countries in the world are saying it's safe to take during pregnancy. And we have actually vaccinated several pregnant women at the Right Center.
Hey, thank you. I think you have answered all the questions. I really appreciate you getting on the call with us today. And, you know, like John said, it is a very confusing subject. A lot of rumors are running around, and I think it's important that we become informed consumers and understand what is out there. So thank you for joining us today. If anybody has more questions, you can definitely send them to us afterwards, and I could reach out to the doctor about the questions. But with that, we really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me. Bye-bye. If you have any questions, just email it to me. I'll be happy to respond back by email.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Before we move on, let me point out that today's webinar is sponsored by Food Shelter. Food Shelter is our public relations company that works on a pro bono basis for PRLA and really works for all of you, and has been instrumental over the last year in helping to get the word out about the plight of our industry and the need to, number one, get open, and number two, get aid. And without the work of Food Shelter, we wouldn't have reached the 10 billion impressions we have about this, and things like getting the $28.6 billion restaurant revitalization fund created as part of the recent American Rescue Plan. These kind of things happen because we get the word out, and we get the word out because of Food Shelter. Food Shelter is available for any of you, and they've also recently announced that any accounts that come their way through the PRLA, through any of our members or friends, they will donate 10% of their fee to the Hospitality Assistance Response for Pennsylvania HARP. We really appreciate Food Shelter's partnership. Thank you. Melissa is doing double duty today. She's also attending the House Labor Committee hearing about the unemployment situation, but she is with us at the moment. She may at any point in time have to jump off, and you might have to listen to me, but unless she tells me otherwise, I think she's going to take the next section.
I don't know that she's, I don't know if she's on.
Okay, well, she's on, but she said she's on both. So let me go ahead and keep on going until she pops in.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so as I just mentioned, as I alluded to, the American Rescue Plan was passed by the Senate over the weekend. This was something we predicted would happen, and that it went through basically intact. The Raise the Wage Act, which was the act that would have raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and would have eliminated the tip credit, was pulled from the package, not just because of the recommendation of Chief Parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough, the first female chief parliamentarian in the Senate, but also because of the work that you did in reaching out to the House and the Senate about the damage that the Raise the Wage Act would do to the industry and to our tipped employees, that it would hurt our tipped employees. There was 8 Democrats that voted against including it, which is significant as we address the Raise the Wage Act later, which it certainly is going to come back. However, it was not included in the American Rescue Plan, which was passed by the Senate. What was included in it ultimately was a $28.6 billion package for the restaurant industry. The Washington Post on March 7th announced that the restaurant industry was the big winner in this entire package. Only 3 industries received a carve out. the restaurant industry with 28.6 billion, aviation with 3 billion, and music clubs and venues at 1.25 billion, and many, many other industries that requested relief did not get it. The reason that the restaurant industry was cited was because of, again, the work that we've done and you've done in letting legislators know how devastating the pandemic and the government regulations have been to our industry over the last year, telling your stories to Congress, to senators and representatives every time we're sending an action alert out, responding to that. And the Washington Post also cites the work of the National Restaurant Association, our partners in Washington, and in particular in coalescing the Senate version and the House version together into one cohesive package that the House and the Senate could get their arms around for this bill. It's a huge win for our industry, something we should be very proud of and happy about. If it hasn't been passed by the House yet today, it likely will get passed very shortly in the form that it's in right now, and it will be signed by President Biden. You would expect him to sign it right away, since it's largely the package that he put forth that's now been passed by both the House passed by the Senate and will be passed by the House. It also includes, in addition to the RRF, the Restaurant Revitalization Funds, which I should mention, do not look for that money to get into restaurants probably until May. It's going to take some time to get this organized because it's a new package for them. The SBA organized a PPP package in fairly quick order, but that was technically a loan package, which they're very familiar with. They're not as familiar with pure grant packages, and there's a lot of rules and regulations that are going to have to be written around this in order to get the money out. So it's going to be coming, but it's not going to be there as quickly as you might like to see it. Unemployment, enhanced unemployment was extended. There was extension of leave tax credits. There's $1,400 stimulus checks going to each household or each person that makes less than $75,000. And there's some calculations in there to take into account. And there's quite a bit of state and local assistance. This is important to Pennsylvania and to all of you, because the thing we've been working on with, or one of the things we've been working on with the legislature in Pennsylvania, is a grant package for the entire hospitality industry that would be supported by money that comes in the state and local assistance out of the American Rescue Plan. In addition to that, direct aid for our destination marketing organizations through Representative Rader's bill that likely will get rolled into the budget process, but also needs to be funded by this money. So that state and local assistance, which coming to Pennsylvania will be significant. We're going to be working to get a large portion of that into the hands of our businesses, hotels, restaurants, travel and tourism entities that have suffered so greatly throughout this time period. I mentioned that the Raise the Wage Act, even though it was removed from the plan, due in large part to the good work that you did. Again, even though the chief parliamentarian ruled against including it, the Senate could have overridden her. They didn't, because of the work that you've done in getting the word out about it. That clearly will be coming back, and it'll be coming back fairly shortly as standalone legislation, in our opinion. I want to remind you that the National Restaurant Association Public Affairs Conference is being held April 20th and 22nd virtually. This is the perfect year for you to attend this. There's a nominal charge of $50 if you're a PRLA member. I think it's $75 if you're not. And that covers the programming, which is going to be significant. There's going to be great programming there that you will enjoy, and the opportunity to meet with your congressman or senator virtually that we'll be organizing at PRLA. I believe that there will be more attendance of senators and representatives. We often get to meet with their aides and sometimes with the actual senators. I think they'll probably all come because it's virtual this time. And it really gives you a great opportunity to talk with them directly, particularly at a time where the Raise the Wage Act is so important that they understand. That would really like to see you participate in this. You can register through our website. Again, registration's simple. We organize all the meetings. You'll be meeting with the actual congressman or congressman from your district. Obviously, the senators represent the entire state. So please register for the National Restaurant Association Public Affairs Conference, April 20th to 22nd. Okay. The grants that are based on the $145 million CHIRP program, which stands for COVID Hospitality Industry Relief Program. As you remember, and just as a reminder, Governor Wolf recommended around the holidays, about the same time the restaurants were shut down, that he was going to move $145 million from the the Workers' Comp Fund over into a general fund and encourage the legislature to give it out to small businesses in need. The legislature, again, largely because of your efforts and the efforts of PRLA, recognized that these small businesses in need were restaurants and hotels. And rather than making it a broad grant program that would have diluted it significantly, the legislature, both the House and the Senate, voted 100% unanimously to give it all to restaurants and hotels. We recognize that $145 million isn't enough money, but the symbolism that we've reached them with the message about who really needs the funding is really important here, and the unanimous bipartisan support was important too. The program has to be open by March 15th. It's required at the county level, which means that your county website will have the applications available by the 15th. Many do already. And as we continue to get information on that, the various counties will be featuring it in the daily updates. Melissa is back. And with that, I'll turn it over to her. And now you can hear from the real pro. Melissa, welcome. Thank you.
I don't know. I got to have hearings more often. It's kind of nice that I'm like easing into things, especially after that monster of a federal page I put together. Sorry, John. John did talk about CHIRP, so I know we're already getting some questions on that, so I will respond to those at the end. Just as an FYI, like I said, you can see these upcoming hearings and meetings that are happening within the legislature. The House comes back to session. I want to say it's in 2 weeks, but I don't want to be a liar. The House and Senate are both in session next week and the week after, and then the Senate will go into budget hearings. So they're coming back to have hearings, as you can see, and move some bills. House labor is happening as I speak. So huge thanks to Kamara Edwards, who our president of our Philly chapter, and from Sojourn Philadelphia, who talked about the issues her employees and she as an employer has had with the unemployment compensation process in Pennsylvania, which continues to be a nightmare. On Monday, we do have some members testifying before the House Tourism and Recreational Development Committee. I mentioned this last week to really give a broader overview of the impact COVID has had on the tourism industry. Lots of attention on restaurants, understandably, but we want to make sure that we're also making sure the legislature understands the bigger impact that COVID has had. So that is on Monday, next Monday. And for those of you that are not aware, we are going to be getting a new executive director of the House Tourism and Recreational Development Committee, Al Taylor, who is an encyclopedia of knowledge, literally an encyclopedia of knowledge as it pertains to hotel taxes and tourism funding, has earned his retirement, and his last day was yesterday. So huge thanks to Al. I'm not sure who could possibly fill their shoes, but I look forward to watching somebody try in the near future. So we should know who that new executive director is going to be in the next day or two. And then next week, as of right now, we are moving a number of PRLA's legislative liquor priorities out of committee. That entails items such as extending your licensed premise beyond your contiguous property. So you can license an area as long as it's within 1,000 feet of your current property. Continues to ensure that you will not be charged safekeeping fees if your license is in safekeeping. Licensee discount is part of it, an increase to 15% for those that have been impacted by COVID. So an increased licensee discount from 10 to 15%. And then last but not least, not that we ever want anybody to enter into this world of needing to do so, but if you do have to close your business, it allows you to off-sell your beer, wine, and spirits to another business if they want to buy it to try and recoup some of the lost revenue that you've had. So those bills are going to be moving hopefully out of committee next week and through the legislative process. We already are working with House leadership in the Senate to move those bills, but there will be a lot of action coming up over the next few weeks as it pertains to our legislative priorities. And with that will come PRLA's grassroots push regarding those legislative priorities to make sure that we continue to stay front of mind with the state legislature. Statewide mitigation, not outdoor capacity, it's driving me crazy. So we'll do St. Patrick's Day first. We've been saying this for a few weeks, and happily, it sounds like the governor's office is sticking with what they promised us, which is that there will not be any increased mitigation for St. Patrick's Day. So not the weekend before, not for St. Patrick's Day, not the weekend after. So for those of you that are planning on that, we do not expect any increased mitigation coming from the governor's office. The same rules continue to apply. 50% capacity if you're self-certified, no bar seating. You need to get some corned beef with your green beer. 11 p.m. last call, drinks off the table by midnight. So all the current rules will continue to apply for St. Patrick's Day. There will not be additional rules. We have, as you all are aware, we are officially a year into this hot mess. Next week, we're going to have a huge party because it's going to be St. Patrick's Day and like a year since the full shutdown in Pennsylvania. So we'll have something festive for that. But as you all know, when we get new guidance from the governor's office, it takes us a few days to figure things out. And one of the conundrums we're trying to clarify right now is calculating capacity if you don't have a fire code occupancy. For those of you that are nerds like me, you'll notice that the event guidance has been taken down. That website that had that kind of event guidance information of how you calculate your occupancy. And obviously when the state said you could do 15% indoors, 20% outdoors, they're like, we don't need that. But with that, they took down that 67 per 1,000 calculation, which was if you don't have a fire code, you would do 67 people per 1,000 square feet. 20% of that would be your outdoor occupancy. So that's what we were assuming. Then if you go down the rabbit hole of going on to the restaurant guidance page, that uses a 25 people per 1,000 square feet occupancy flat rate. Then if you go to the LCB guidance, it uses both. So I would suggest at this point in time, continue with the 67 per 1,000. That seems to be the most universally used, but stay tuned. We did send an email to the administration today to just try and get some clarification of what the parameters are. If you don't have a fire code, how you're calculating that occupancy. So we will provide that information. Another just reminder, because as you know, when I get on these calls, I like to bring up things that I'm getting a lot of questions about. Tents, they have to be open on two sides. If they are open on two sides, they are considered outdoor space. So you're not limited to the sides of the tent for the event venue. Once it's outdoors, it's the entirety of the outdoor space that you're using to calculate your capacity. If you do 3 walls down or you enclose a tent, it's now indoors, and that's where you're going to be subject to the indoor limitations of that tent. So just wanted to clarify that. What's next? That's what everybody's asking, and shout out to Steph Otterson in our office who put out shared a good tweet with us yesterday. Every state is moving forward. New York, outside of New York City, is at 75% indoor occupancy. Maryland is just use social distancing, still wear your masks, 50% for events, live a free life. And these are states that are surrounding us, are opening up well beyond what Pennsylvania is allowing right now. And as this tweet said, no state wants to be the 50th one to reopen. No one wants to be the last one to reopen. So I do think that we're going to see some movement forward with an announcement from the governor's office. Logic tells me it's going to be more significant than what we got on March 1st. That's logic. That's me hoping. That's me trying to apply sense to what has been a year-long insensible situation. But I would stay tuned. I'm going to be we'll be meeting with the governor's office per our request either this week or next week to talk about next steps. So just want to flag that and just let you know that I know I've said some people say there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm like, I just think somebody's shining a flashlight in my eyes, but I really do think that we're going to see a significant step forward in terms of Pennsylvania's current mitigation over the coming weeks. Local. Everything's like a little bit of a mess right now, which is typical. Philadelphia, for my friends in Philadelphia, we are losing a battle there. So for everybody that is located in the city of Philadelphia, if you have more than 50 employees and you have utilized the tax credit that has gotten extended in the federal package, the 80 hours that you're able to offer your employees if you choose, if you have utilized that 80 hours because let's say your employee had to quarantine for 2 weeks in November of 2020, City Council is prepared to pass a bill that requires you to pay another 80 hours out of pocket if that employee gets COVID, needs to quarantine for COVID, or take care of somebody with COVID in 2021. It's the only place in the country that's tacking on an additional 80 hours. And quite frankly, we're losing the battle right now. So if this is an issue, if you might only have 25, 30 employees right now in the city of Philadelphia, but as long as this COVID crisis continues and Philadelphia is in a state of emergency, you will be required to offer this once you hit that 50 employee threshold. So once you bring back employees for outdoor dining, or as you're getting creative, or as we're able to open up more, this is something you're going to have to start paying out of pocket. And it's been pulling teeth to try and get people engaged on this. So we're continuing to work through it. But quite frankly, it's not going well. So if this is something that you are concerned about or could impact you, you really do need to reach out to your council members or reach out to Ben or I so we can get those stories to council members, because right now they are looking to stack on an additional 80 hours of paid leave. Allegheny County, everything went to a place yesterday with paid sick leave. Every time I think we take 2 steps forward. So here's the news on Allegheny County. I've been telling you all for weeks that Allegheny County was planning to pass paid sick leave. Earlier this week, the county solicitor put together a memo that said, and like I said, this doesn't impact my Pittsburgh people. This is for all my businesses that are in Allegheny County, but not Pittsburgh proper. The county solicitor essentially sent a letter that said, actually, what you're doing is illegal. Based on the Supreme Court ruling that said Pittsburgh's paid sick leave was legal, the Supreme Court said that the idea of paid sick leave has to originate from the county health department. That is not what happened in Allegheny County. It originated from council. So the county solicitor said, if you pass this bill, somebody could sue and somebody will win if they sue. So the understanding was that council would take a step back and basically, go about the process the right way. Instead, they passed the bill anyway with 10 votes, which is kind of a 2/3 majority to override a veto from the county executive if he chooses to do so. So we're in it's a long story about being in limbo in Allegheny County. So there's 2 items of importance there. One is, does the county executive veto the bill because it's illegal and he thinks it's silly to fight a legal battle over something that they know they'll lose? And if he does veto it, does county council, some of those people who voted for it, take a step back and say, okay, we should do this the right way? Or does the county executive sign it and it becomes law and there's a lawsuit from somebody? Or does the county executive veto it and county council overrides him? So I guess there's 3 scenarios, but we don't know the future of paid sick leave in Allegheny County. We thought this was something that once it was known that it was illegal, it would go away, at least until they do it legally. Now we're waiting to see what happens there. So for my friends in Allegheny County, but not Pittsburgh proper, please stay tuned for updates as it pertains to paid sick leave. This is great. This went so quickly. I love when I can come in halfway through a webinar.
I might make you do the upcoming events if you keep.
No, thank you. No, thanks.
Well, everybody, this is our March schedule for chapter meetings. As we've talked about before, this is a great way for you to connect with your local regional area and see what's going on and possibly work on some projects on the local side. So please check these out. You can register on our website. They are all Zoom calls at this time, so it is as easy as that. The next slide. Tomorrow we'll be hosting a webinar with Renee Hoge. She's with the National Restaurant Association Solutions. She deals with ServSafe in our state of Pennsylvania. I do think it's an important webinar to get onto because I think training probably has gone by the wayside with the pandemic last year and classes not being held. You need to be looking at your certificates. These inspectors, when they come in, they're going to want to see current certificates. You need to look like you're looking to comply with getting certified, with your certifications and making sure your staff's up to date. So she's going to be going over what is available, some of the new products that are out there, and some additional training that is available that you could be offering to your employees at this time. Melissa will be back next week with our industry update. I don't think we have any special guests, so it'll just be the same old PRLA staff. On the 15th, the National Restaurant Association will be having a webinar about the restaurant revitalization, the RRF next steps. So discussing the program, providing steps for restaurants to apply. So please check that out. And there will be another ERTC webinar next week, talking about how to walk through the updates of the ERTC and what you may have some more questions about. So I know there's been several of them, but definitely check out this one because you may have more questions that have come up since the last webinar. Next, as always, carry out PA. Please make sure to update as things change with your business if you're opening up more. And with HARP, we will be starting awarding the grants probably next week to the additional 200 applicants, and are working on a way for fundraising for 2021 so that we can keep this fund alive. And lastly, obviously we just talked about the training solution, so please join us tomorrow. And scholarships, we are still accepting applications. We have about 70, not all of them are complete. So please be sure to let the students know that this is something they should be looking at. There's some good money that we'll be sending out this year. With that, I think you have a few questions.
All right. From what like I said, I never like to look ahead because I like to be surprised, but from what I could see by glimpsing through my scroll up, we're all over the place today. Just to clarify, once funds go to the state, they may then choose to give direct aid to DMOs, or is this separate from the federal funds? Yes, actually, that's we have so many bills that are going. So if I don't bring up a bill in my comments, definitely thank you, Jessica, for asking this question. Shoot it in the chat so I can talk about it. So there's the bill from Representative Rader, which creates a grant fund program for DMOs. That would come from that huge pot of money that we're expecting from the federal government. We don't know exactly what. I would say 3 to 4 billion. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But what happens is it was what will happen before. As a pot of money comes to the state, it will come with guidance of you have to use these funds for somewhere within these parameters, hopefully not balancing the budget or giving it all to corrections like they did last year. But this legislature can then decide how to use the funds. So for the DMO grant program for my destination marketing organizations on the phone, now is the time that you need to start reaching out to your legislators and explaining to them the importance of establishing a grant program for DMOs and using that bill as a template. That the state is not promoting itself right now. It's on the backs of our destination marketing organizations to bring people back to Pennsylvania until the state decides to promote again. And it's really important that you receive funds for that. So you should be reaching out to your legislators in terms of that, but it is not, there isn't a line item in the federal bill that says this is for a grant program for DMOs. We're going to be asking for some of the pot of money coming from the feds to be allocated to that grant program. Sorry, I'm late. That's okay, Sherry. I don't know if you covered this, but do you know the qualifications for the federal money and the money coming from the county? Will one loan grant affect the other and make us non-eligible? So the current RRF, that 28 billion is not going to impact the grant program, the CHIRP grant program that is in place right now, because and John probably mentioned this, and if he did, I'm repeating it, so I apologize. The funds from that federal restaurant grant program are not going to be available until end of May, maybe June. We have to go through this entire regulatory process with the SBA to even develop how they're going to release the funds. So you will not be impacted for CHIRP as it pertains to that eligibility. If you received PPP in the past, or you received another county grant in the past, it doesn't disqualify you from receiving a CHIRP grant, but it doesn't put you to the front of the line. And we talked about this. So there are certain entities that are going, it's not just a first come, first serve for this grant. There's going to be entities that are going to be eligible more than others. So if they didn't receive any PPP or other grant money, more than 50% revenue loss. There's something else that I'm missing. There's just a few standards needed by the governor, which is everybody under the sun in some way or the other. They will be put to the front of the line. So it doesn't disqualify you if you have had P3s or others, but it will not make you first come, first serve for it, as opposed to others. And I do want to be, and I've said this before, but I feel like I need to reiterate it because I know so many legislators are saying, like, look at us, look at this grant program we did to save the industry. This money is going to go fast. And it's not going to help nearly the amount of people that need it. And there are so many other entities out there that don't qualify for this grant that need it. But even for those that qualify, a lot of you, unfortunately, may not receive the grant because it might go to those 50% or more loss revenues before it hits anybody who hasn't hit the 50% number. So we just need to be aware that this is not if you've been impacted by COVID, you're guaranteed these funds because they are going to go quickly. They're going to get scooped up quickly. So don't bank as you're, figuring out next 2 or 3 months costs. Don't bank that this grant is going to come to you because it is going to go quickly. I mean, as I said, PRLA said we need $1 billion. They gave us 145 million. We have a ways to go in terms of what we think this industry needs. Maximum grant amount through county on the 15th is only 10,000 max per business. Not necessarily, Bruce, and this is the joy of the legislature saying counties can decide how they want to handle it. The legislation in and of itself says grants can be between 5,000 and 50,000 per those who receive the grant. It's up to the counties to decide how they want to distribute grants. Some counties might say, if you are in that 50% revenue loss or greater, those people are going to get $30,000. And if you didn't have that much of a revenue hit, those people are going to get 10. Some counties might say, we're just going to do a flat $10,000 grant to those that apply and meet the requirements. It's going to be up to the counties to decide how to determine how much the grants are going to be for, how many they're going to give out, and how they're going to run through the eligibility. So there might be a county that says we're just giving out $10,000 grants, but it's up to each individual county, which is why we've been asked this before. Will PRLA have webinars about this? We really can't because each county is doing it their own way. And I don't have the mental capacity to try and do 67 webinars for each individual county. I love you all, but not that much. So it really is going to be up to you to go to your county's websites and determine what the requirements are and what the standards are going to be. And I see this note, Bhavesh, for the public affairs conference. Yes, Bhavesh, we'll make a note if you're scheduling, and that's important too. If you are registering for the public affairs conference, and we don't have you down, if you're in another state, what's going to happen is they're going to automatically register you with that state. So if you're registering for public affairs conference and you're not in Pennsylvania, please flag it for us, just like Bhavesh did, so we can make sure that we're pulling you into our Pennsylvania meetings as well. So if you have more than one property in more than one state, please let us know that. How has or will PA reinstated the requirement to look for employment while receiving benefits? They have not, as far as I know, Rachel, but I want to double check that. I think while we're continuing to receive federal assistance, the requirement to search for a job is not in place. But once COVID goes away, that will be a requirement. So I'm not aware that you still need to look, but we can look into that. There's a question about the code, which Steph answered. Thank you. For the NRA Public Affairs Conference, you do need to use the code that Steph posted to go for $50. Otherwise, it's $75. Knowing that social distancing, masks, and butts and seats to eat, drink are required, is there additional PA guidance for buffets? It's been we've been so weird on buffets. They're allowed, but there's just nobody acknowledges it publicly. There's really not additional guidance for buffets. Now there's best practices that we urge everybody to consider. Those practices include, of course, not having self-serve buffets, having one of your employees serve the food. Having the plexiglass shields over above the buffet is something that you should be considering. Doing smaller portions or smaller trays of food within the buffet, so you're turning the food over, are all things, but there's not any additional requirements regarding buffets in Pennsylvania, just the common sense best practices that you should be considering if you choose to have a buffet. We really need 50% indoor event occupancy to be announced, even if not effective until April 1st or 15th, so that we can calm down our brides about holding their May weddings. Yes. And honestly, Bruce, that is a conversation that we're having every single day. And that's why I'm hoping our next meeting with the governor's office that will lead to an announcement that is not, you know, on March 29th, they say you can go to 50% on April 1st, because I know that for all of our caterers, all of our hotels, that's not giving you the leeway time you need to deal with the bride situation. If when we renewed our license, we indicated our extension of premise, must we do anything else for the overall area to be used permanently? So this is for the emergency extension of premise. You don't need to do anything right now. That is going to continue for the length of the COVID emergency. Now, when it goes away, when the state of emergency goes away, either through the governor saying it's over, depending what happens in May with the voter referendum and the governor directing the LCB to not offer it anymore, you can make it permanent. I think it's a $600 fee that you need to apply to do an extension of premise and make it permanent. But for right now, your temporary extension of premises can continue for the foreseeable future. The LCB did reiterate that in its most recent guidance. I think we put in the update yesterday. Let's see, do you think there will be a secondary tier of group gathering guidance once we are permitted to open further after the CDC's updated guidance on vaccinated people gathering without masks or distancing? Maggie, I don't think that we are going to see the masking requirement. I know the CDC guidance says, you know, if you've been vaccinated and you're with your family who's also been vaccinated, you don't need a mask. I do not see a universal mask requirement going away at events in the near future. I just don't. I know we all love Texas, but I don't think us going a Texas route at this point in time. So, and even Maryland, like I said, Maryland relaxed a lot of its guidance and still has a universal masking requirement. So I don't think we're going to see a secondary tier, at least not in the near future. I think masks are going to continue to be required if people are not seated. And I know we have the PA Marius website up there. Please engage that. The more pressure we can put on the administration, the more we can make progress in moving them on reopening. When can we expect to see documents on how the restaurant relief funds could be distributed and how much we might qualify for? I'm not sure if we put this in the webinar. There is going to be on March 15th at 1 o'clock, the National Restaurant Association is having a restaurant, an RRF webinar, just to basically say, last week we had one where they said, this is what we think it's going to be. They're going to have one Monday that says, this is what we know is in there because of the legislation, and this is what you can start to do. People that want to apply are going to have to, I think, register, I guess is how they're explaining it, with the federal government to signify their intention to apply. So definitely register for that on Monday at 1 o'clock. We are going to be having a series of webinars on the restaurant relief funds. And that's because, like I said, we have the House is going to pass it today if they haven't already. The president is expected to sign it on Friday, is what we've been told. And then what's going to happen is the SBA has to develop how this is going to work. This is not, as I said before, the P3 where we're just throwing money into an established program. The entire program has to be developed. So what's going to happen is it'll be signed. The SBA will work on preliminary guidance. which PRLA and our national partners at the National Restaurant Association will be providing feedback to that guidance. And then the final regulations will come out and the application process will open. So it's not expected to open until, like I said, May of this year, which is why this second round of P3 that we fought so hard for at the end of the year is so important, and was so important that we got it passed, because we recognized the fact that the RRF Restaurants Act is all great, but not if you have to wait 8 months to access those funds. So if you haven't gone after your second P3, you should do that, because these funds aren't going to come out quickly. I can tell you that our national association has contracted with the law firm that basically helped develop the regulations for the shuttered venue program. So our PRLA and our national association is taking the lead in terms of getting guidance out there that helps all of you, gets you the information you need. So like I said, next webinar is Monday at 1 p.m. It's the first in a series of informational webinars we'll be providing to help you through this process. And thank you, Michael, for the thank you. Just so you're warned, I'm starting to do interviews today for this Open Director of Government Affairs position. So my effort to clone myself is going to begin this afternoon. It's going to be great. Thank you for the thank yous. And yes, we should definitely stay tuned. I mean, as you all know, John's good cop, I'm bad cop. But I think the administration is going to have a really hard time getting on a call with us after seeing what all the other states around us are doing and saying, no, we think that we're good. So I would prepare yourself for an announcement. And our hope is that the announcement will be sooner than later.
Well, thank you guys again for getting on. We did record this. We will send this out. If you have any questions about vaccinations and you would like to connect with the doctor or want to send the questions to us, please feel free to connect with myself or Eric and we can get in touch with him. Melissa and John, thank you for presenting this information. And as always, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Enjoy this warm weather and please stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
We'll do
Melissa.
this next
Thanks,
week.
all.